Real quick before we begin, remember my Dementio and Forful's Ballad of Hatred Tomodachi Life song video I made? Well, a friend of mine animated it. Please go watch it and comment something nice. Once upon a time, long ago, opinions were invented. Before long, they became so popular, everyone was forming opinions about absolutely everything, and for the most part, people would peacefully discuss their opinions with respect. But sometimes, a large enough group of passionate individuals band together and say, "Thing bad!" And another, equally as passionate group would retaliate with, "Thing good!" And that's how wars start. Yep, that's a great intro, won't make people mad at all! Citations, gaming enthusiasts, George Mario Nerd here. And it's certainly a shame that such a divide exists in the Paper Mario fanbase, but I have already discussed that in a really good video of mine you can find linked in the corner. But today I'm here to discuss Paper Mario the Origami King, a game that released recently on the Nintendo Switch, a game that I very much enjoyed. Right from when the reveal trailer for this game released, I could tell this was a big step up from the last two games in the series. And now after having played it, I can certainly see that the developers went to great lengths to address people's key complaints with the past two games. Bringing partners back, giving us a new villain, abolishing the world map, creating an entirely new battle system that, at least in my opinion, is an improvement compared to Sticker Star and Colour Splash's format, and providing us with a much better, deeper story and characters with incredible world design. Spoiler warning for the whole game from this point on. The writing for the various characters and NPCs in this game is just golden across the board. The comedy in this game is frequent and fantastic, with just about every little unimportant NPC saying the funniest things. I have my screenshot album absolutely full of terrific jokes said by random toads. The design that went into the NPCs is also a huge improvement on the previous two games. Not only are the toads now allowed to wear a wide variety of different outfits, but now since the villainous force in the game is no longer Bowser, the Koopa Troop is no longer hostile. This, of course, massively increased the diversity among the NPCs, and even allowed for areas like the Developmental Temple and Sniff City, areas populated by species that are Bowser's minions, to exist in the game. And now we reach the point in the script where I realise I've only ever made one review video before, and I don't really know how to structure them properly. So here I'm just going to discuss the whole story and the chapters in order, and try to cover as many relevant points as I can in that format. Get ready for one of the weirdest reviews you've ever seen! Before the first chapter begins, there's a sort of prologue section in the game taking place at Peach's Castle and the Whispering Woods, and boy what an opening! Mario and Luigi arrive at Toad Town for the Origami Festival, but find it abandoned. Clearly something went wrong, and Peach should really stop hosting festivals. We then encounter Origami Peach in the disturbing scene we saw in the reveal trailer, who sends us into the dungeon. Up to this point, the tension has been steadily building. A lot of work went into setting up an unsettling, foreboding atmosphere. But at this point we reach a brief, more cheerful pause. Allies! Sure, the people we meet in the dungeon are Bowser's minions, but they treat us in a friendly manner and we're clearly in the same predicament. There's even a Goomba with a lot of respect and admiration for Mario, and he's excited to see a Toad for the first time. Remember this information for later, because emotions are about to happen. However, they're quickly taken away by some odd Shy Guys, and that's when we meet our main companion of the game, the ever-cheerful, ever-wholesome, and ever-lovable Olivia. And apparently she's stuck in Flipside. Once you break out of your cell, you take a peek into the next room and see some disturbing things be done to Bowser's imprisoned minions. Wow, that Sniffit in Colour Splash said he couldn't do anything beyond throwing Mario in jail without increasing the game's age rating, and would you look at that? Torture and disfigurement does indeed do that. Then we get a good helping of Wet Floor Sign Bowser hilarity. I am so glad they made him more present in this game. He was the funniest character in the first three, didn't speak one word in Sticker Star, and was possessed for the majority of Colour Splash, only getting one little joke about Mario Kart. But in this game he's back in all his glory and I love him. Once we climb the stairs, we get our first emotional gut punch in the game when we're forced to fight the Goomba from earlier. And at this point I'm thinking, wow, this game is pretty good at making me feel sad over the death of what first seems to just be a plain generic Mario enemy after being built up to be a likeable character. I wonder if they'll do it again. After that battle, we're introduced to the game's villain, Olivia's brother Ollie, whose motivation for being evil is... well, I guess we'll get around to it eventually. But then there's the epic cutscene where the streamers appear and wrap around the castle to lift it up to elsewhere. Which is definitely not a trope that's been used before! And amongst the chaos, Mario and Olivia are knocked into the Whispering Woods. But this shy guy right here performs an epic heroic rescue while the castle is being wrapped and lifted, but he gets done so dirty by Bowser. He was the MVP here, yet Bowserman just scolds him for bumping into a streamer. Poor shy guy. No. On that day, this noble fellow displayed admirable courage. He is no longer shy guy. He is now bold guy. And now we arrive at one of my favourite bits of the game, the Whispering Woods. It starts off creepy and mysterious, with unknown voices whispering about you and giggling all around. The game does well to provide a creepy and mysterious atmosphere, while not making it all that scary. It's fairly tense, but the woods' little jokes at Mario's expense and the general pleasant look of the forest keeps the scene from feeling frightening or hostile. Then it's revealed that the voices you've been hearing were actually the trees themselves, which really surprised me. The trees are actually really fun and interesting characters. Usually non-living things in the Mario world like hills or clouds or trees with eyes are found in the background of various areas, but now they're actually woven into the story. It's nice how they all revere old Grandsappy, but sad that they can't really do anything to help him, so they enlist the much more mobile Mario and Olivia to help out. Also, this tree all the way over here has something really sweet to say. Then, out of nowhere, we're treated to this thing of beauty. Words just cannot describe how fantastic this scene is. This is where I fell in love with this game. Then we sojourn to a quaint little campsite/barbecue place where we see in slightly disturbing detail how Sentient Tree's wood is used. They seem okay with it, so we shouldn't feel bad about setting them on fire, I guess? Also, hey Philboard, nice to see you, it's been a while. Although around this early point in the game when you're experiencing your first battles, not only are they laughably easy from the Whispering Woods to the end of Chapter 1, but also Olivia goes overboard with the tutorials. She tends to teach you the exact same things multiple times in unskippable explanations. I don't mind it too much, at least not on my first playthrough because Olivia is so likeable, but it's definitely true this game holds your hand a lot early on, and straight up makes it difficult to lose or get hit by enemies for a while. We make our way back to Toad Town, Goombas, funny dialogue, big Goombas, Shy Guys, sewers, hat. In case you haven't noticed, I'm trying to pick up the pace because this script is already 6.5 pages long and we haven't even reached Chapter 1 yet. Then we rescue Luigi, and to my utter delight he actually has a purpose in this game. In Sticker Star he was just hiding in random spots and has been cursed with the same muteness Bowser had. In Colour Splash you get a few letters from him and he shows up to help briefly at the very end of the game, but in Origami King he goes on his own quest to find the key to Peach's castle and has actual story relevance and stuff, which is great. They give the people in this game a lot more characterization than in the last two. Even though the game doesn't have an awful lot in terms of fully original new characters, they still do a lot of interesting stuff with the characters it does have. Also, it's really nice to see Olivia treat Luigi right after just about everyone in the past Mario RPGs seemed determined to insult the poor guy at every opportunity, especially this scumbag Door. He made poor Luigi cry! After Luigi sets off on his quest in his cart, Paper Mario Kart game when, Nintendo, we rescue a workaholic Toad and finally reach Picnic Road. Picnic Road feels like this game's answer to Colour Splash's Cherry Lake. A beautiful, cheerful area early in the game with pretty music playing. The red streamer is one of the more diverse areas in the game actually. With the quaint lake and flowers in Picnic Road, the pale yellows and greens and mysterious atmosphere of the Developmental temple, and the at first intense, then upon future visits after finishing the chapter, cheerful windy atmosphere of Overlook Mountain. The Koopas worship the Developmental, which is a very clever pun on vellum paper and elemental. I didn't know what vellum meant before this game and I had to look it up. But the holy shellstones that grant access to the temple have been stolen by the Folded Soldiers, so you must explore Overlook Mountain to find them all. This is the fun part: bargaining, fishing, death and football. Once we enter the Developmental temple, we discover an evil far greater than Ollie folding everyone into origami. A plan far more abhorrent than the Shrooms' genocidal intentions. A deed far more dastardly than Count Blake destroying all worlds. Here, we discover the poor Koopa Troopa's sacred sites have been turned into a tourist trap, and this despicable man makes them pay him simply for the privilege of worship. He's a disgrace to the Earth Elemental. Oh well, hi there Earth Elemental, say goodbye to your toe privileges and Every time I see Olivia dancing as a giant turtle, it cracks me up. And now that we've lowered it, we can finally enter Overlook Tower, and things are not as they should be. The music is dramatic and threatening. Every toad in the building is traumatized by some unknown monster, and there's loads of damage that's been caused by the unseen foe. The atmosphere in the tower is excellent. There are many drawings on the walls and floors that were apparently made by the monster, and one of them is actually Mario's death sprite from Super Mario Bros. Talk about intimidation tactics, drawing a picture of your enemy dead on the floor. As you scale the tower, you're repeatedly attacked by colourful missiles, and avoiding them gets pretty stressful. This is probably my favourite tower level in any Mario game, to be honest. Once we reach the top, we're finally introduced to the monster who attacked this tower, the first member of the Legion of Stationery, the Missile Maestro himself, Jean-Pierre Coloured Pencils the 12th. Okay, let me talk to you a bit about the Legion of Stationery, and make this video a bit more like a review and less like a simple story recap. I love the Legion of Stationery. Technically, yes, they're household items, and you could be mistaken into thinking they're just a continuation of the things, stickers and cards from the last two games, but they're so much more than that. Coloured Pencils may be the only one with an actual name that isn't just what he is, but each of these characters are integrated extremely well into their chapters, and are used in very interesting ways to affect the plot of each area they're in. That's something that was always done very well in the first three games, but compared to Sticker Star and Colour Splash, this is a huge step up. In Sticker Star, Goopa Blooper was the only boss who affected the world they were in beyond the level you faced them. In Colour Splash, it was Larry. And I suppose you could argue Lemmy too, because there's a bunch of circus stuff in the forest before you reach him. But the Legion of Stationery are actual characters who affect the world around them for their own reasons. And their designs may be simple, but I've seen a huge amount of fan art from various people who love the game and these characters, who have thought up their own designs for the Legion if they were humans. And I love to see how inspired people are by simple funky office supplies to make some great artworks, and some very interesting character designs. But, simple though they may be, the Legion of Stationery work very well, and in a world of paper and paper people, stationery that's designed to alter paper to their will can be terrifying. Also, each of their boss themes slap hard. Anyway, back to Jean-Pierre. He's a stuck-up artist and obviously a Super Paper Mario fan. Huzzah! A man of quality! The boss battles in this game are extremely creative. The regular battles are, of course, also puzzle-based, and I do really enjoy the challenge of solving them, at least once they become even the slightest bit challenging when you reach Chapter 2. But the bosses are a whole different beast. Since you need to plot Mario's course and try getting him to step on the right panels in just the right places, there's a great deal of fourth-dimensional thinking involved, especially when taking into account the gimmicks of each boss you're fighting. And with coloured pencils, you've got to avoid his missiles. You can shut his lid when he's about to launch for extra damage, but if he's charging up his rainbow roll, you can't shut his lid anymore, but you can instead grab his pencils and slam them into him for huge damage. I won't go into this much detail about all the bosses because, you know, the video's already too long as it is, but all the bosses use the 3D space of the board in their own unique ways, making no two fights feel alike. The bosses are loads of fun, and a huge step up from have the right thing or lose the battle bosses from the previous two games. And with coloured pencils defeated, and his art sadly and inexplicably disappeared, Chapter 1 is finished and the red streamer destroyed. Now that the Toad Tram is untangled, we can finally make our way to the best chapter in the game! I should mention that I've already gushed about how much I adore Autumn Mountain in another video, a Paper Mario collaboration with a bunch of way more successful YouTubers over on Game Domain that I'll link in a card, but that won't stop me from gushing even more in this video. On the tram, we meet our first secondary partner of the game, a Bob-Omb who Olivia affectionately names Bobby, and he's lost his memories. He joins us on our journey to make new memories and to find himself, and he makes the second chapter even more of a delight to play. Partners are something that veteran fans of the series have been really wanting back since they were absent in Sticker Star and Colour Splash. And although they're handled very differently here than in the first three games, being mostly exclusive to their respective chapters, I still really liked their inclusion. They all add so much to the chapters they're in. The game is so much better when Mario has more than just one partner, because then Olivia actually has someone to talk to who can talk back. and though they aren't controllable, are less reliable, and have much simpler attacks in battles than the partners did in the first two games, they're still very helpful in finishing off handfuls of enemies you miss if you're not strong enough to beat them all in one go, or don't quite solve the puzzle correctly. Even though their usage in this game is simplified compared to the first three games, I think the partners in this game are a great improvement on the devs' part designed to address people's gripes with the recent games, and I'd say they increase the game's quality enormously. Autumn Mountain is breathtakingly beautiful the whole way through. Up on a peak blanketed in many shades of red, orange and yellow, with a Japanesey tranquil music and faint sound of the breeze adding to its beauty. There are many landmarks of interest, the river and lake once you've filled them, the picturesque prairie of tall grass plains, where the music actually changes into a softer, quieter version of itself, and it's wonderful. The bridge from which you can see the ocean of trees beneath, and even jump off into those trees and enjoy the cheerfulness and brighter colours of oranges and yellows that Chestnut Valley has to offer. And the Developmental shrine, which heavily contrasts with the aesthetic outside with its mild blues and dungeon theme. The story in this part of the Blue Streamer is very simple, but still a good time, especially with the company we keep and the friends we meet. Chestnut Valley has excellent comedic Bobby shenanigans, and you've gotta love a canned food party. I also really like how introspective Olivia and Bobby get on the benches. The benches are actually some of the best bits of this game, and a chance to take a break and reflect on our journey. I had a great time solving the puzzles in the Developmental shrine. This one took me a good long while to figure out, but the feeling of satisfaction when I finally did was amazing. It's pretty clear at this point that this is a great game for puzzle lovers, and if you don't like puzzles, well, you're probably not going to enjoy the battles. The water Developmental itself, however, was a nightmare to beat, even if these are the best water effects I've ever seen in a video game. The boss battles were really hard for me to wrap my brain around at first, and I was really struggling with the water Developmental and its freaking water spurts, which I often didn't even notice because they're obscured by its wings. I spent hours fighting it, losing several times. Each time I exhausted all my money pretty quickly by paying for more time. I was getting too stressed to think straight about the puzzle. Until eventually I had an epiphany.
What do I do? Yeah, cheating!
Now that I'd figured out how to cheat the system, I had all the time I needed to plot my movements and beat the water Developmental. From that point on, I went about the boss battles far more confidently, knowing that if I should get too stuck, I can always cheat by taking a screenshot. I walked out of that shrine much better at the bosses than when I went in. But now that we've learned waterbending, it's time to fill up the lake again and give this monkey some tuna. Oh sweet, the monkey was actually the oarsman we needed, and now we can have a grand old time down the river. Then we reach the Shogun Studios amusement park. And the term shogunate is actually from ancient Japan and refers to the military government they had, like samurais and stuff, which is pretty neat, as Shogun Studios has that very fun Japanese theme with many cool attractions. You bet I bought that lifetime pass. But when we arrive, Shogun Studios is a ghost town. We're greeted by some park visitors rather than anyone who works there, because it's been taken over by folded soldiers. This segment of the game revolves around exploring the park, looking for various objects you need to trade to various individuals in order to progress and find Luigi, who has the key you need. And although it took me a long time and a lot of thinking to make it past this area, I really enjoyed figuring it out and exploring the space, slowly digging up the information I needed. And there's this really sweet scene where Mario wearing this oversized Goomba mask sends Olivia into a fit of hysterical laughter, and Bobby makes some offhanded remark about how it could be useful in case we ever needed to make her laugh. Please remember this information, you will need it in order to feel sad later. Then we carefully infiltrate the Big Show Theatre and are forced to perform in 3 honestly superb plays thought up by Rubber Band in front of a captive audience. And is it just me who would really like to see the rehearsals, with the delightful Miss Band sat in the director's chair yelling at everyone about how wrong they're getting it, except for Birdo because they're a professional? Just me? Alright. Anyway, we finish off my favourite part of the game by twanging poor Rubber Band into the wall and leaving Shogun Studios triumphantly amidst a festival in our honour. This is certainly the most joyous moment in the game, and it's a very satisfying and climactic ending to my favourite chapter in Origami King. Then there's a moment that I feel is more important than most notice. Bobby believes his journey with us is over and starts to say goodbye, but Olivia gets a bit cross with him and demands that he's part of the team now and they wouldn't leave him behind. Not long after that, Bobby sacrifices himself to save Olivia. I believe that following this, Olivia felt extremely guilty and even responsible for his death, because he was only still on the team because she pushed him. Later, after the yellow streamer, Mario and Olivia leave the desert behind, but when Professor Toad says he would rather stay, Olivia just happily says goodbye and they part ways. At first I found this ending to the chapter and conclusion to our journey with the Professor very anticlimactic, but now I realise that Olivia didn't want to make the same mistake again by pressuring people to accompany us on this dangerous quest when they don't want to. Anyway, now we come to the weird in-between chapters 2 and 3 bit of the game that takes place mostly in chapter 4's territory. This is, of course, Bobby's sacrifice arc, and I believe it was handled very well. First off, we arrive in Sweet Paper Valley, and the music here is glorious. This song creates a tense and somber yet determined atmosphere that works really well as a precursor to his sacrifice, and a salute to his bravery after the fact. Then there's the moment where Bobby walks off a little, stares intensely into the distance, and realises what he must do to save his friend, while a slower version of the tune plays. Literal goosebumps. With him being a Bob-omb and all, this sort of outcome was in the back of my mind since I first saw Bobby, but I never thought Nintendo would be brave enough to actually do it. The journey through the Princess Peach is also very emotional, and full of great Bobby moments, but it also has its own great self-contained story. Kinda similar to Overlook Tower, it's very tense, and clear this area recently suffered a great catastrophe that traumatised all the Toads. Goopa Blooper is gradually teased and built up to be a terrifying monster, but this time it feels even more impactful because Bobby himself went through Bloopy Boy's attack. Back at Sweet Paper Valley, Bobby explains everything to Mario. What happened to him on the Peach, and the contents of the box they went to the ship to retrieve. And with that, Bobby lays down his life to rescue Olivia and allow you to continue on your journey. Naturally, Olivia is devastated over this. You manage to cheer her up with the Goomba mask, and she gains a greater understanding for how important our mission is, and that Bobby would want us to continue. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on Bobby's sacrifice, I made a video about it you can find in the card in the corner. So, let's talk about the Yellow Streamer. I'm sorry to say that I found it hard to enjoy Chapter 3. After just having lost Bobby, morale was low and things felt grim. I don't have a lot to say about this chapter, which is a real shame because this is a great chapter, with honestly the best cohesive plot out of all of them. The chapter boss, Hole Punch, has stolen the sun and kidnapped the Toads from Shroom City, causing perpetual nighttime and a bunch of Sniffits to move in and claim the city as their own. The Sandpaper Desert is vast, fun to drive around and explore in your boot, and has lots of little areas of note with secrets to find, but there's not a lot to say about it. Sniff City is a spectacular Las Vegas-like place with bright lights and neon everywhere, and Arabian-style music playing. There are of course lots of Sniffits to talk to, and they're great to chat with and find out about what's going on in their lives. It's at this point I'm again really thankful that there's so much more species diversity among the NPCs. And the Sniff City Hotel is just great. I want to be a designated pacer. Eventually, we get some incense, accidentally summon an enormous epic Pokeboss, and recruit the oddly shaped piece of confetti named Professor Toad to our team. Professor Toad is an underrated partner. He's actually the only one in the game with proper functions outside of battle, making him feel like the only one akin to the partners in the classics. He's also pretty funny to boot. I love his cute little conversations he has with Olivia as you drive around the desert.
Before we can enter the Fire Developmental Cave, an ancient, sacred pop song must be sung! And as Olivia sings her heart out, the game felt joyous and hopeful for the first time since Bobby's death. I really feel like it really helped Olivia too.
But now it's time to spend an embarrassingly long time trying to get past these memory puzzles, get burned a bunch of times, and fight a frustrating boss. Now we can burn things! Then we need to find some rocks, light some fires, and get some lanky guys to look at an underground pyramid. Yeah! Archaeology! And now we can finally enter the final area of the chapter, the Temple of Shrooms. Gotta say, I love this part. Very intense, very spooky. A lot of murals of lanky ancient toads on the walls, although none of them follow you around or jump out of the wall to attack you, unfortunately. There is, of course, lots of exploring and plenty of puzzles to progress. It's not long before you come across some toads who are missing their faces. There are lots of people who dislike how much the new games lean on the paper part of Paper Mario, but in this game I think they play around with that idea in some very interesting ways. Like there's no way something like having a hole where your face should be would ever slide in any normal Mario game. It would be far too gruesome. But when everyone's made of paper, The game can use a lot of body horror ideas that wouldn't be possible in other games that aren't 18+. In Sticker Star and Colour Splash, they mostly use the paper gimmick to replace the interesting ideas, worlds, stories and characters of the classic games. But here, they use the concept of a paper world to enhance those things, rather than supplanting them. So these poor toads have been robbed of every sense besides touch and hearing. Thankfully, that's all they really need at the moment, because it's time to dance! Going around the once frightening temple recruiting toads using extremely danceable disco music is a hilarious contrast. This place doesn't feel even remotely scary anymore with such a change in music. Love it. I actually really enjoy dancing to Thrills at Night in real life. I dance to Mario music more often than I probably should. Once we get a real dance party started, Hole Punch, the disco devil himself, is ready to burst out and join us. He punched out the sun, he punched out the toads' faces, and if you're not careful, he'll punch yours out too. And maybe your ass as well. This guy's animation is a thing to behold. They've really got some incredible moves, and of course the music enthusiast in the Legion of Stationery would have the best battle music. Oh yeah. I actually don't really want to fight this guy though. Wish we could have had a dance-off for the sun and faces back instead. I know they all do bad stuff and all, but this game did a pretty good job of making me feel sorry for office supplies. Just imagine Rubber Band getting redeemed and going on to work with Flurry and Dupliss. With the Disco Devil defeated, the sun returning to the sky, and the toads no longer feeling like Swiss cheese, everyone can finally return to the outside world. Honestly, I preferred the aesthetic of the desert and Sniff City at night time, but it's worth it to see how much the city changes once the toads return and learn to share their space with the Sniffits. It's really sweet to see how well everyone gets along and how happy everyone is. The world of Origami King is one that grows and changes as the story progresses, and it's wonderful to see after the mostly stagnant environments and characters of the previous two games. Then we defrost and meet the legendary Captain Teode, and he's introduced with a nice little musical reference to the best chapter in Colour Splash. I do wish he actually became a real partner for the next chapter instead of the sort of pseudo-partner he becomes, but maybe he's just too overpowered. I get the impression that someone with their eyes always closed and their hands in their pockets has nothing to fear. Since this is the first chapter that I can't simply walk to the next one from, we make our way back out of the desert to the next area, and Professor Toad decides to stay behind and we say goodbye to him really anticlimactically as I mentioned before. Which is a shame, but he is the only partner we can just return to using whenever we go back to the area they're in, so that's nice. Now we've arrived at my least favourite chapter, as well as the one I have the least to say about. Which is a good thing because this video is quickly becoming a movie. The purple streamer is not only misnamed, because that's clearly pink, but this part of the game feels disjointed, lacking plot, and without a proper partner accompanying you, it feels a lot quieter and overall less entertaining than the rest of the game. Exploring the Great Sea and uncovering its secrets does feel pretty exciting each time you discover new islands, but that wore off for me pretty quickly. Each island is just its own little puzzle, which is fun, but it just feels more like a collection of minigames than an RPG. In terms of plot in this chapter, we do discover the island where Olivia was folded and meet the origami craftsman, which is extremely significant for the game's overall story, but besides getting another key from Luigi, it doesn't add to this chapter's plot. There's also a bunch of toads that abandoned the Princess Peach when it was attacked that need rescuing, but they are optional. The only real plot in this chapter is finding this paradise these mysterious statues keep talking about, which is certainly a pretty satisfying mystery to uncover, but when the plot of an area is just find the next area, I really get the impression that the game itself doesn't care about this chapter either. Locations of interest include Scuffle Island, which is a fun boss rush with very hype music that absolutely shatters the game's economy, Diamond Island, a rather gorgeous underwater environment where we face 3 challenges and also fight the Ice Vellumental, and the Sea Tower, which houses many challenges based off all 4 Vellumental temples and is quite the architectural marvel. Once we reach the top, it's time to fight the charismatic New Yorker mafioso, Tape. And this guy's fight is a strong contender with the Water Vellumental for most frustrating in the whole game. Since he rolls around depositing tape on the battlefield, sticking parts fit together, the battle got progressively more and more infuriating. Eventually the whole thing rotates as one and you can't slide anything. And you can burn the tape off, but as soon as you do, he puts more on so you don't really get a chance to attack. That fight took me a while. With Tape defeated and the obviously pink streamer destroyed, we activate the 4 elemental statues and ascend into the paradise all those statues on the islands were talking about. Throughout Chapter 4, we were travelling with the Sea Captain Toad and Captain Toad. Even though they weren't really partners because they stay on the boat and the submarino, they came with us on this leg of our journey. But now we're just leaving them behind at the foot of the tower to go to the 5th chapter without so much as telling them. So they're just waiting down there until we decide to go back to them. This is even more anticlimactic than Professor Toad. This paradise we've been searching for ends up being the Shangri Spa, a heaven-themed spa up in the clouds run by white-spotted toads. And let me say, it's fantastic how they made lots of new outfits and designs for the toads in the game. Sticker Star had almost entirely generic toads with only a very few exceptions, and Colour Splash dabbled in making a few of the toads more unique with hats, and apparently the developers still weren't allowed to have the toads be clearly male or female for some reason. But it makes the world feel more alive when we see them with different hats or outfits depending on where they're from or where they work. I'd say the Shangri Spa is my second favourite chapter in the game after Autumn Mountain. Here we learn a lot of lore, the aesthetic and music are very pleasant, and blimey, is that Kamek? I think that a lot of people say that Bobby is their favourite partner in the game out of respect to the dead, but Kamek is definitely my favourite. He's honestly the funniest character in the game, he's very intelligent, and it's so nice to see the insight he gives us into Bowser and Bowser Jr. It's adorable how much he's characterised as Bowser Jr.'s granddad. I love their little conversations as we walk around the spa. Once we meet up with Kamek, we hear about how he accidentally cut Bowser Castle's engines instead of activating the secret weapon due to some very poorly and hilariously designed signs, and crashed on the Shangri Spa's banquet hall. Now all the Koopa Troop have been enlisted into working at and cleaning up the spa to pay off the damage, which is hilarious. There's a huge amount of funny dialogue that results from this. This chapter is the height of Mario's unlikely alliance with Bowser and his minions, and I love it. Bowser is always at his funniest in the RPGs when he's on your side, and it's no different with Kamek and Bowser Jr. Speaking of Bowser Jr., when we approach Bowser's castle, he tries to swoop in with his Koopa Clown car, only to be cut to shreds by the chapter boss, Scissors. Which, by the way, is a great way to establish them as an intimidating presence right off the bat. But I legit freaked out and thought Bowser Jr. was straight up dead after this scene. But no, apparently water is good for Paper after all! So now this chapter is making up for the last chapter's lack of a partner, aside from a nice but brief collaboration with Luigi, by giving us 2 partners for the price of 1. Kamek carrying Bowser Jr. around rolled up on his back. Aww. We journey around the spa, enjoying the different springs. We have a brief scare when Olivia becomes unfolded, but Kamek freaking saves her life. And after that, going back in that particular spring makes her scared and she forgoes the soak, which is a cute touch. But not all up here is choirs and harps. The Spring of Jungle Mist brings with it quite the adventure, where we're hunted by a frankly terrifying Paper Macho Chain Chomp. This is another of my favourite parts in the game. It develops Kamek's character an awful lot, and gives us plenty of comedic moments where he ditches us to escape the chomp. But then Bowser Jr. bathes for too long and loses his colour, and since we don't have Huey on hand, rest in peace, we must take him to the secret spring of rainbows. And although the 4th one is my least favourite chapter, although this one is my second favourite, we now reach my least favourite part in the whole game. Shy Guys finish last. In the previous 2 games, there were very fun game shows, okay, Sticker Stars was a lot better than Colour Splashes, which is a weird thing to say, that went by the names of Hit It or Sniff It and Sniff It or Whiff It. But they were highlights of those games. I look forward to them. Shy Guys finished last, however, I hated. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but my mind works pretty slowly. I'm not stupid, and I love puzzles in games, but give me a time limit as small as this gives you, and the result will be intense stress as I become virtually unable to think clearly at all. All of this game's battles are also timed puzzles, but the ability to pay to win if I needed to removed my stress. This game show basically shut down my brain though. Most of the challenges were far too complicated for me to wrap my head around in time. Screw Shy Guys finished last. After that ordeal, there's a Sumo Bro boss fight, and this and the Handaconda boss later are a great and refreshing part of this chapter, giving us 2 proper bosses that aren't Developmentals or members of the Legion of Stationery. Bowser's castle is overrun with folded soldiers, so in order to take it back, Kamek gives a rousing speech as a call to arms to the Koopa Troop, and now we have an army. They're optional, but we can actually help our flat paper friends out in fighting the folded soldiers during the banquet hall brawl, and doing so puts us in a unique kind of battle not found anywhere else in the game, where we must carefully line up the enemies, but avoid attacking our allies who are also on the battlefield.
And now we enter the horror portion of the game.
Like sneaking around creepy corridors with no music? Enjoy your friends being suddenly taken by unseen entities? Appreciate being jump scared by bizarre, not quite alive looking faceless figures? Do you relish in body horror where all your allies, shredded, cut up bodies cover the ground as you approach the boss and then be forced to battle a horrifying amalgamation made out of their faces? If you said yes to any of those questions, this is the perfect holiday retreat for you. I adore this part of the game. It pulls out all the stops and really goes hard with making you fear and respect Scissors. Scissors beats Paper, it's as simple as that, and the sentient Shears know it. Scissors is prideful and arrogant, and a full-blown anime villain. They know they could just end Mario with ease in an instant, but they decide to instead play with their food and sheath their blades at first. But eventually the gloves come off, and it turns out all of Scissors' attacks are one-hit KOs. Even jumping attacks mean instant death. My condolences to anyone who thought Iron Boots would make jumping safe. So, how can Paper beat Scissors? Bring a rock. And ice is essentially just a wet stone. Now we can rescue Bowser, and so begins the first time Bowser has openly collaborated with Mario since Super Paper Mario, and it's glorious. He was the funniest character in the first 3 games, but his dialogue was absent in Sticker Star, and he only got like a couple lines out in Color Splash that weren't mind controlled by black paint. But now we get a whole chapter of the game with the most noteworthy villain in gaming as our companion, and I love it. So Bowser's up and ready to kick some origami ass. We get some hilarious minion dialogue on our way to follow him, then we get somebody fired and get to talk to Bold Guy. Don't worry, Bold Guy, I appreciate you. Olivia has a moment with a troop of Bob-ombs that were about to send to their deaths, and she gets a bit of closure regarding Bobby, learning about their purpose in life of living to help others. Again, please watch my Bobby video. This part of the game as we make our way to Peach's castle is very exciting and high adrenaline. Firstly with an awesome aerial battle on Bowser's airship against an armada of paper planes worthy of Star Fox, and then a rather stressful jaunt through Hotfoot Crater. Never has a game made me actually scared of Goombas before, but here you must flee from a horde of paper macho Goombas while avoiding various obstacles in the volcano. It's honestly extremely heroic when Kamek and Bowser Jr. put their lives at risk trying to hold back the swarm so you can escape. It made me really worried they wouldn't make it. Thank goodness they did. Even Bowser saves us too. It's so weird and touching seeing him, his son and adoptive father go to such lengths to help us. They know Ollie is a big threat, and they know Mario is their best bet at beating him. Upon finally arriving at Peach's castle, we're joined by Luigi, who was somehow unknowingly successful at finding the key we needed. Sadly, we lose the man in green shortly afterward, and Bowser makes an unexpected but very welcome fourth wall breaking joke. This might be the best joke in the whole game. And now let's go save Peach! Whoa! Well, the castle's different now. Origami Castle is an incredible sight. It's the embodiment of Ollie's plan to reshape the whole world into origami. All you have to walk on are narrow paths suspended above a sea of origami fortune tellers that deal 100 damage. And the music, oh the music. The music gives this area an intensity unmatched in its grandeur. The guitar, the choir, the piano, and how it builds up to not an epic conclusion, but a suddenly eerily peaceful part that seems to be a combination of Ollie's theme and Olivia's. Once we're almost at the throne room, we come face to face with Ollie's doggy, Stapler. This is the boss responsible for Bowser's current condition, and for all the folded soldiers supposedly. And once it's defeated, Bowser is freed from his sandwich boredness, but the folded soldiers are still a thing, which is kind of a plot hole. But can I also mention, the way Mario can use his thousand-fold arms to deal the final blows to the Legion of Stationery can be downright brutal. These are living beings, this one is characterised as a dog, and Mario grabs it at both ends and breaks its spine. Or its jaw/spine. There may be quite a bit of body horror involving paper people in this game, but if these funky office supplies were flesh and blood beings, this would be extremely gruesome. Olivia was the one who went on an emotional journey this game. She wants so much to see her brother change his ways. She can't believe he's done such horrible things to her and everybody else, and she's afraid to face him after coming so far and being helped by so many people's sacrifices. There's a lot at stake, everyone's counting on her. The weight of all this suddenly strikes her when we reach the game's final bench. It's a really touching scene. Bowser talks to Olivia and gives her the pep talk she needs. She's just such a pure soul, I love her so much.
And in my efforts to make this huge review and talk about everything while also keeping a relatively quick pace so it's not quite so ridiculously long, I feel like I haven't spoken about her enough. She's the core of the game. Mario may be the titular character in his games, he may be the main hero, but as a silent protagonist, he doesn't really have any depth. It's his companions who interact with the world, who build relationships with each other, who grow and change as people. And this game does that beautifully with a myriad of characters, developing Bowser, Bobby, Luigi, Ollie, and of course Olivia. I wish I could do this story justice, but this review is already 7,950 words long. Compared with the other villains in the series, Origami King doesn't take much time to focus on Ollie. Unlike the first 3 games which had you check in with the bad guys after every chapter, and sometimes even more, you only get to see and interact with him 3 times. The opening in Sweet Paper Valley, and here in his castle. We only find out about his motivation here at the climax of the game, and a lot of people don't like it. Ollie is essentially the Hitler of the Mario franchise. He believes origami is the superior race over the native flat paper people living in this world, and he felt extremely disrespected by his creator when the origami craftsman wrote on him, fueling his personal hatred of Toads after one bad experience, and only actually meeting one. It's easy to look at these motivations as petty and minor, and that's because they pretty much are. Racist motives and feelings of superiority come from the individual. They're not understandable or relatable by sensible non-racist people. And although Ollie acts all regal and superior, it's important to remember he's only like a few days old. He has these powers and abilities others don't have, and he's essentially just a child who is convinced his worldview is right. His motives aren't well thought out. That's the point. He's just an edgy baby man throwing edgy baby tantrums. After an epic 3-phase battle with Ollie, and succeeding in avoiding one heck of a fart, the titular Origami King is defeated, and in his final crumpled moments, he tells his sister he's proud of her, and finally learns what the origami craftsman wrote on his chest. "Dearest Ollie, may you grow into a fair and kind king." He laughs at the foolishness of his actions, because after all the hatred he had, and the suffering he'd caused, all his creator wanted was to wish him well. He bestows upon Olivia his 999 cranes and passes away into a simple sheet of paper. And then comes Olivia's sacrifice. She uses the 1000 cranes to wish all of her brother's origami be undone. And that includes her because he folded her. It's a beautiful, bittersweet ending that you kinda expect after the sacrifices of the last 3 floating main Paper Mario companions. And before you ask, Tippy did it best. But no matter how hard I try to like this ending and be moved by it, I can't help but think how easy it would be for Olivia to not die. If she just added an "except for me" asterisk after her wish, or if Mario just made another 1000 cranes and used his wish to bring her back like he did with Kirsty, she'd still be alive. So although I adore the vast majority of the stuff in this game, the ending doesn't quite sit right with me. After seeing a lovely origami festival and a beautiful credits sequence showing how everyone you met on your journey is doing, the game is at an end. So what are my overall thoughts on this game, and how does it measure up against the others? Origami King was an entertaining, beautifully crafted, well-written, hilarious ride. The highs of this game are up there with some of the best parts of the classic trilogy, and its lows are still plenty fun and interesting in their own right. Mostly. I think it's a tremendous improvement on the previous 2 games, with much better and more diverse characters and NPCs, and much more thought put into the writing and creation of character journeys, bosses, and the plot. The locations are wonderfully unique and appealing places that are woven together so well to create a connected, cohesive world, without a dumb world map that breaks the immersion. The battle system is a rather subjective change because of how drastically different it is from anything I've seen in an RPG before, but I personally think it's a significant improvement compared to the 2 prior arts and crafts games because it's more valuable to the game and more fun and experience. The soundtrack in Origami King is a masterpiece that fits the locations and gameplay so perfectly and make you feel any emotion the story has extremely effectively. They put so much heart and effort into this game's OST, to the point that some of the best ones appear in the game normally only for a few seconds. In terms of where I'd rank it among the other games in the series, it beats the previous 2 pretty easily, even though I do like them as well. But in terms of how it compares to the classic trilogy, I haven't played the first 2 very much, I'm not nostalgic for them, and I haven't touched them in a long time. And even if I wanted to, my Wii U gamepad's control sticks are ridiculously drifty, so the first game is virtually unplayable. But I honestly think I enjoyed this more than I did the first game, so I'ma put it right here. But I'm not giving it a score because I don't like scoring games and objectifying them like that. They're subjective, and I kinda cringe when I look back at my attempts to give Mario Party 8 a score. And to wrap up a review type video like this, I should give it a score, right? Well, I've given my ranking system some thought, and I think I should award up to 5 points for how much I subjectively like a game, and up to 5 for how objectively good I think it is. Thank you deeply for watching this behemoth of a video all the way to the end. This took a ridiculously long time to make, and I'm frankly excited to get this thing finished so I can work on some smaller, less risky projects. Be sure to take a look at the rest of what my channel has to offer, please consider subscribing, and until next time, farewell everyone.